Welcome to Season 4, Episode number 43 of the Outlap F1 Podcast. We are proud members of the Ship It Studios Podcast Network, and this is our 2022 Mexico GP race review. You've got Andy, and I'm along with just Deanna tonight. But Dee, it's good to see you. How do you enjoy racing at normal times for us? Circadian rhythms a little better, or was that just screwing with you like it kind of did me?
Yeah, it's screwing with me. I miss my morning race, and then I go about my day, relax a little bit. Kind of backed everything up and made for a busy Sunday afternoon. But fun day in Mexico, I guess. Mostly just I really enjoyed the Mexican version of the F1 tune. I think that was the best thing to come out of today.
I think that was the winner. I'm glad they actually worked that into their first part of like the driver intro and stuff. Mm-hmm. That was actually pretty cool. But we will get into all of the fun and some not so fun things from the Mexican Grand Prix weekend. As always, you can find our show, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and YouTube at Outlet F1 Podcast. Please take a look at our link tree in our show notes. Do us a solid, click the like and subscribe button on YouTube or click that 5-star button if you're on Apple Podcast or Spotify. You can email our show, and many of you have, so thank you very much, at chatnow@outlapf1.com. You can find our wonderful website, www.outlapf1.com. If you're a brand new fan, welcome. We're happy to have you on board. Feel free to check out our F1 for Beginners back on Season 4, Episode 4. We're actually going to be coming up to the point where we're going to have to do this again for next year. So we will update that as we can and get you all caught up and ready to talk like an F1 expert. As always, thank you so much to our hashtag Outlap F1 Nation so much for continuing to step up. Thank you all so much, specifically to Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Cody Walsh, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to become a member of our hashtag Outlet F1 Nation, please see our link in our show notes. $1, $5, whatever you'd love to give, we would be most grateful for. We've tried to make improvements throughout the year to the show. That's where it all goes. So please feel free to check that out if you'd so like to. Please also feel free to check out the good folks at Manscaped. Get the 20% off and the free shipping from their wonderful products. Vincenzo's shirt line, f1guy.com. Feel free to take advantage of that. He's got some nice, cool shirts. One with Monaco on it. One with the Scuderia is back, although the Scuderia not representing all that well this weekend, but we'll get into all of that in just a little bit. Our traditional sponsor, athleticgreens.com/emerging. Please feel free to check that out for some delicious and nutritious goods that they offer. And our final sponsor, the Portage Park Development Project, the thriving community in the Upland Metaverse. If you're from Chicago, Portage Park will sound familiar because the Upland Metaverse is based on real-world cities and properties, and Portage Park is an actual neighborhood in Chicago. The Metaverse version of Portage Park is the most developed neighborhood in Upland with over 700 supported members and property owners enjoying competitions, community initiatives, and local shops with monthly town hall meetings to connect with fellow Uplanders. And racing has come to Upland. Portage Park has developed a racing team ready to fight for the top step at the podium. They have a training academy for drivers and racetracks in development and are making most of their local shops and attractions. They want to show the best that Portage Park has to offer. Come join them. Links to the Portage Park Discord server, racing track maps, and socials are in our podcast show notes. We hope to see you, as always, in the Metaverse. All right, now that we've gotten the particulars out of the way, bit of news, a lot of news that kind of came out in the early part of this weekend. This is a bit, I guess, pretty positive, came out of it. Fernando Alonso had his P7 at the USGP. If you were with us for that review, we said that he had that lovely penalty. The penalty has been rescinded. His P7 is restored after a successful right of review claim. They did have their protest of the Haas protest ultimately kicked out late on Thursday, but then they asked for a right of review, which they were able to do. That was ultimately upheld. Feels like to me this is most likely the right result, but wow, how we get here. It's kind of crazy, but I guess it's the right answer. Dee, what's your take on it?
I mean, this just got dismissed because they submitted it too late, correct?
Yeah, the Haas one did, yes.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it came down to 24 minutes.
Yes. So, I mean, The whole thing was so ridiculous, which should have never come to this. I'm happy Alonso got the result back that he deserved. This was all just dumb FIA stuff that somehow ends in the right answer. But
I mean, part of me feels for Haas. You know, when you go ask the race director, "Hey, can we submit this?" and the guy tells you, "Yeah, in the next hour it's fine," and then it turns out not to be fine. That's a problem. So I don't think there's any winners in this other than I don't think it ever really should have been pushed that far anyway. The bottom line is I don't think Haas should have had the meatball flag shown to them in their specific situations. Yeah. It was probably less FIA intervention being better across the board. But, I mean, I guess we'll take it. This has not been a great 3, 4, 5 week period for the FIA in general. So I guess when they do something right, I guess we can call it out and say, hey, at least they got the final result right. So we will leave it there. Turns out to be quite significant in the P4 battle. So going into this race, it now goes up from 6 back to 11 points, the delta between Alpine and McLaren heading into this weekend. The other bit of news that we had is we finally got our final cost cap breaches adjudicated fully. So here's what we have. Aston Martin received a $450,000 fine for their 12-item procedural breach. And the one that was the big headline grabber, Red Bull Racing, was given a $7 million fine and a 10% reduction in wind tunnel time for their 13-item procedural breach, which resulted in a net overspend of, I think when you actually decant it all down, of 432.6 thousand British pounds. Christian Horner then had what I would call his glasses-filled presser. I'd never seen him have glasses before, but I guess he wanted to read notes or something during the 45 minutes of him saying how terrible and awful the penalties were. D, thoughts on this entire mess?
I mean, I first of all hate that it took 25 years to get here. And just kind of all of the fanfare and drama around it is just annoying. It should I think the penalty should have been more clearly defined to begin with. I'm good with the penalty that they came out with because it can't just be a financial penalty for something like this. If you breach the cost cap, if it's just a financial penalty, all the big teams are going to okay, let's breach it. I'll give you $10 million more later, whatever. We'll just factor that into our budgets. So it needed to be something that kind of hampered them in another way. So the reduction in wind tunnel time, I'm good with that. I think that was a kind of different left field solution that I didn't think that they would do instead of taking points away, but I'm okay with it personally. But yeah, the whole thing was just chaotic and a disaster and didn't need to take this long.
Yeah. I mean, the timing of it and the fact that, I guess it comes back to when they negotiated this thing and decided to have the cost cap that they wanted to keep, if there were breaches, air quote, secret. Well, FIA, F1 reporters are who they are, and they will find out one way or another your deepest, darkest secrets. And now it's all kind of out in the open. If you actually read the whole 3 pages, it does take you through point by point by point what the FIA corrected. And some of it results in actually less breach for Red Bull. One specific thing is that tax credit that Red Bull didn't claim as part of their submission, but the FIA said, you could have claimed it, so we'll reduce it down. So, I mean, all these numbers are thrown around, 2.2 million, 1.8 million. It all comes down to a net 400,000. They are over the line here. I concede that. And I think the penalty of taking wind tunnel time is probably the appropriate method as well. I didn't think you needed to give a financial fine on top of it. I don't know what that does because they just take it from, a pool of money that they already had. I thought the wind tunnel time was probably a little bit light. I didn't mind if they just said 25%, I would have thought that would have hurt. That would have hurt enough to really warrant and be the deterrent to say, hey, don't do this again. But I will concede, these were very much immature regulations. They didn't game it out. Shocking. Yet again, the FIA doesn't game something out that they write and they codify. we should not be shocked at this point that somebody took it to an extreme and now we're in this weird place. But yeah, I mean, effectively what it was a plea bargain deal. They get off. They don't get off with nothing. I didn't think they should lose points for it, but they should have something that hopefully disincentivizes them from ever trying to do it again. And I hope that the rest of the teams look at this and say, okay, we're not going to screw around with the cost cap because look at what the hell happened to them. As long as that happens, it's fine. This is a fine enough penalty. And again, we're only talking about a 0.037% overspent. We're not talking about real gains. It didn't look like any of the mistakes that they made were really related to car performance. A lot of them had to do, amazingly enough, with U.S. employees and the fact that we have this thing in this country called Social Security that employers have to pay into that they weren't accounting for as costs. They were saying, well, we have a U.S. employee, we pay them the salary, we'll count the salary against our cap, but we're not going to count the payroll taxes. Well, the FIA said no. That was a lot of it right there. So there's a lot of minutia involved in it. I highly recommend you go. I tweeted out the entirety of the decision. You can find it on our Twitter. I highly recommend you read the whole thing, all 3 pages. Don't stop. Don't get pissed off at one phrase here or there, and then kind of decide for yourself on whether you think this is appropriate. It's the penalty that we got. We're going to have to live with it, and eventually we're going to all have to move on because we can only keep beating this dead horse. It's over with as far as I'm concerned. So,
yep.
All right.
At least that finally puts a lid on 2021. We're done.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they did not come and send the Lucha Libre wrestler into the Red Bull trophy case to come break into the trophy and parade it around town. Like I'm sure somebody thought that would be a great idea.
October 22, and we're done with 21. Oh. Yay!
Well, that's like most businesses, you know?
Yeah.
You file for extensions and all that. So I'll be honest, I'm glad this is done. This felt too much like work. This feels like so much what I do in my everyday life. And I'm like, no, I'm going to get away from stuff like this. I don't want to deal with this, but fine. It's over. It's done with. We move on. All right. So we will now get into the weekend proper, and we'll start with our headline of the day. Dee, what's your headline of the day?
Can we please change this track layout? It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And we saw last weekend how these new regs can work. And we've seen it a couple times this year, but nothing about this track in the past and the present has worked. The stadium section is cool. The environment is amazing. The fans there are amazing. And I don't think there's anything like the celebration and the support that Checo gets there. But I just wish that they would have a better race.
Yeah. You feel for the masses who show up in droves and bring lots of passion and fervor to a race weekend, and this track just doesn't work. I had been hopeful, this was one of those circuits I said, maybe the new regs can fix it. And the answer, I think, is a resounding no, at least to this layout. So my headline is just the usual afternoon siesta drive for one Max Verstappen, who claims yet another record in what is going to go down as an amazing year for him. At lap 1, corner 1, that race was over. He was gone and wasn't going to get caught, no matter what strategy Mercedes or anybody else tried to throw at him.
Yep.
All right. So we will get into our qualifying recap. Let's see if I can get my board here. Of course, I did not warm it up, so it's probably going to yell at me or just start playing when it decides that it wants to. Anyway, if not, I'll just put it in on the audio version. So if we get sound, hey, we'll go into it. But going out in P20 in Q1, the Williams of Nicholas Latifi. P19 was Alex Albon. P18, there we go. little bit late, but no problem. P18 was P19 was Alex Albon. P18, Lance Stroll. P17, Sebastian Vettel. And P16 was Mick Schumacher. Advancing through to Q2, but going no farther in P15 was Kevin Magnussen. P14 was Pierre Gasly. P13, Yuki Tsunoda. P12, Joe Granu. P11, just missing out on Q3, was Daniel Ricciardo. The top 10 from 10 to 1 in P10 was Esteban Ocon. P9, Fernando Alonso. P8 was Lando Norris. P7 was Charles Leclerc. P6 was Valtteri Bottas. P5 was Carlos Sainz. P4 was Sergio Checo Perez. P3 was Lewis Hamilton. P2 was George Russell. But at the last, in P1 with a lap time of 1:17.775, had to fight for it a little bit in qualifying, but that was Max Verstappen. D, major thoughts on qualifying?
Yeah, I think it ended up being, I don't want to say a letdown, but I think looking at the practices over the weekend, it really seemed like Mercedes was in such a good spot. And then we get there and Max does what he does. And I know Russell was beating himself up about not putting in a lap time for pole, but he still ended that lap 3/10 off. And I don't think he was ever going to get there. Once again, Red Bull Verstappen, that car driver combo is nearly unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, and it teased you. You know, the Q1 session, it's Hamilton out in front. The Q2 session, it's Hamilton out in front. And just when you think, you know, okay, all they got to do is put it together for one session, and maybe Red Bull turned that engine up just enough for one lap, and the combination of it all came together, and it was 3/10, and Mercedes did not have a response for it. Didn't look like Hamilton was going to be anywhere near that on his lap. Russell was kind of even up until turn 12. Then he had an off, so that lap would not have counted anyway. It would have been really tough to see what that would have done, because I guess the stadium section was the strongest part of the Red Bull lap anyway. So, probably wasn't going to do it. But I mean, it feels very much, this is how the Vettel years felt, where it was like, you know, we can show up and maybe we're going to do it. And then Seb in that Red Bull would just come out and blitz you. Max is doing very much the same thing. But I guess the good news was, I guess the overall qualifying deltas throughout were very, very tight. It was hundredths, it was tenths of seconds, it was hundredths of a second. The difference between, I mean, you look at P9 all the way to P15, and you're only talking about, 0.4 of a second, really, the difference there. So, a lot, very, very tight qualifying. Wish the race would have been as tight as the qualifying was. That's kind of the thing. If you get a spread out qualifying, you might end up with a decent race. If you end up with a tight qualifying, it's usually not a harbinger of things to come. So we will leave Saturday there. We will flip over and now go into Sunday. Not the most entertaining of races, I have to say. So we'll start with our back markers. I don't know how much we're actually going to talk about most of them. I'll talk about a couple probably. The only non-classified finisher, and at least our prop bet, none of us got the point for it because nobody had an AlphaTauri being the one and only retirement. So that didn't help. Yuki Tsunoda not classified, the only non-finisher. Fernando Alonso was classified, although he was scored like 6 laps down. So he finishes P19, P18, Nicholas Latifi, P17, Kevin Magnussen, P16, Mick Schumacher, P15, Lance Stroll, P14, Sebastian Vettel. Aston Martin's form looked like it was a one-hit wonder at COTA, and P13, Joe Granu in the Alfa Romeo. D, significant thoughts from the back markers?
I mean, I guess Tsunoda we'll touch on when we get to Ricardo, I think, more. Alonso, unfortunate for them in the battle with Alpine. We did kind of get a classic Alonso comment on the radio, just saying, what a season, kind of talking down to the team there. It was very OG Alonso on that one. So, yeah, but other than that, the back markers, not a whole heck of a lot. going
Oh, I
on
can't
back here.
find it. But somebody had summed up on Twitter like all of Alonso's stuff, and it's like 3/4 of a page of all the gremlins and things that he's had to go through. So it's yet another engine that goes bang. The only engine that went bang of the entirety of the weekend, which will probably mean he'll probably have to take a penalty come Brazil. So the house of pain for Fernando Alonso continues. You're probably starting to see why he's not keen on staying at Alpine. However, the car they were doing really well. They were going to score some mega points right up until that failure. So that was pretty significant in the battle with McLaren, as we'll talk about when we get to the midfield. Yuki Tsunoda, we'll hold off on that till we talk about Ricardo. But other than that, the Aston Martins looked like they went back to being kind of who they are and kind of where they expected to line up. Zhou Guanyu tried to hang it out long on a strategy, and I don't think it ended up working. He did have the sauce out at the end, but he wasn't able to come back through enough in order to score. But his teammate in the midfield, however, did make his strategy work, as we'll get now into the midfield. P12, we'll start off with Alex Albon. P11 was Pierre Gasly. P10, scoring points for the first time in a long time, Valtteri Bottas for the Alfa Romeo. P9 was Lando Norris. P8 was Esteban Ocon. P7, as voted by the fans, the driver of the day was Daniel Ricciardo. P6 was Charles Leclerc. P5 was Carlos Sainz. And in P4 was George Russell in the Mercedes. So if we didn't have a fight at the front, at least we had some fights in the midfield. Dee, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess kind of starting towards the back here with Gasly. Got a 5-second penalty for shoving, I believe it was Stroll wide. It was very obvious that he pushed Stroll wide. Not 100% sure why he didn't give the place back immediately.
Yeah, that was weird.
However, I think it did work out in his favor, and they kind of pointed out on the broadcast because Albon was right behind. Albon and Stroll got in a big tiff for a while, and that let Gasly kind of scamper off down the road. But we'll touch on Ricardo in a second, but Gasly was on, I think, what ended up being the ideal strategy, which was a super long stint on the mediums and then switched to softs. He had a ton of pace at the end and was coming through, and I think finished just maybe a second behind Bottas for that final points place. Bottas, amazing effort in qualifying. I don't think it quite was there on the race pace.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the second race now. Since that upgrade package for Alfa Romeo, they have found themselves much more back in the fight. I think their average before this was they were always P13, P12. Now they're starting to come in to the fight, and they are in a big points battle with Aston Martin and with Haas for I think it's P7. Or P6, basically. They might be able to catch Aston Martin for P6, but they'd have to really start to score in order to do that with only a couple races to go. But they look like they're back in the fight and heading in with some positive momentum going into the offseason. In terms of, we'll come back to Ricardo because I think that's probably where most of the action and everything was. Want to talk a little bit about the Ferraris. Man, oh man, Leclerc and Sainz, horrifically average on the weekend, and their engine sounded terrible. It sounded like a zipper about ready to, button up, and, you expected the thing to go bang every time they stepped on the gas. Pretty obvious that they had to be running that power unit on a lower mode.
Yeah, it was so bizarre. It sounded more like a Formula E car half the time than an F1 car. You thought every time they cut to an onboard, it was going to be them retiring. I don't remember which corner it was, but they kept getting a crazy amount of oversteer over that one curve. And then, they couldn't do, because I think Sainz was kind of talking about it, they wanting to do a more aggressive strategy, but they had the whole gaggle of cars, I think, from 7th to 15th, it was covered by 15 seconds, directly in their pit windows. So they were just subject to just sit there because anything they tried to do was going to be just make the whole day worse, and it was just a nightmare. I guess the only mildly positive thing is Sainz. It did kind of look like he was on Leclerc's pace the entire weekend, ahead of him. So, good for him, I guess. Yeah.
Well, he finishes a race for the first time in a while.
In a minute,
so,
yeah.
that was positive, I guess, and no weird, obvious, execution mistakes, I guess, for Ferrari. I did see their debrief, and their first words out of the poor guy's mouth, it was some pit guy. I don't know who it is at the Ferrari organization. I didn't recognize the name, but he's like, a very difficult weekend for us and the team, and I think that they were feeling it basically from Friday onwards, and this was probably as good as they were going to expect, and probably where they deserve to be. But let's go from that kind of ho-hum to the guy that if there was action on the day, it was involving one Daniel Ricardo, who found the right strategy. And you said it, I think, quite well, where the right strategy was go on the mediums until they were dead, until there was nothing left, then stick on a set of softs and see what you could go do. I wish McLaren had done the same thing for their other car, because Lando ended up on the hard tire, and we'll talk about the hard tire when we get to the podium. I don't understand why that tire even made an appearance this weekend, but that being here nor there, for Ricardo, that ended up putting him on the right tire at the right time. He had the grip and was able to overcome, as it turned out, a 10-second penalty that he got for coming together with one Yuki Tsunoda at turn 6, I believe was the corner. Looked like Ricardo was trying to make a gap on the inside. Tsunoda kind of comes over the top of him, but I don't know that Danny had necessarily established enough position. Yuki's car kind of goes a little airborne. It comes down, suspension damage, end of Yuki's day. I believe that it was a penalty. I was a little surprised that it was a 10-second penalty, because I've seen other incidents and they usually just say, well, there's your 5-second penalty and we move on. Here, apparently, they thought that was worthy of throwing the book at him. So not sure I understood that, but what's your take on it?
No, I fully agree. I mean, he was partially alongside him, so I don't understand where the 10 seconds came from. Like, maybe if he launched himself from super far back and something that was just like completely not on, I don't know. It's just, we've seen so many incidents like this over the year. It's been 5 seconds. It's always been 5 seconds. Weird FIA inconsistencies where we just can't get a straight answer on anything. So yeah, that was bizarre to me, but the recovery from him was amazing. It was Ricardo of old, and to put that 10-second distance over Ocon, that was awesome.
In the span of about, I think, 7 laps, he had 7 laps to do it. And I remember, and I'm watching the timing, and I'm like, he's pulling a second and a half each lap, and I'm like, he might just hang this out there and do it on pure merit. And sure enough, he had, I think, 2.1 seconds to the good. So he pulled 12 seconds on Ocon. He actually had reduced the gap to Leclerc from, I think it was 45 seconds when he passes him for P7. It was down to like 38 seconds. So he pulled 7 seconds back on the Ferraris. So it tells me two things. Number one, the entirety of this field was sandbagging this entire race, and they were holding pace back because Daniel was really the only guy who had to go all the way flat out in order to make his result work. So that tells me that there was pace across this entire field that wasn't being used. And two, be on the right tires at the right time and look what you can do. I thought it was, this was the guy that we thought, this was the guy. I'm wearing the Daniel cap tonight in honor of him because I thought he was doing great. This was the guy we wanted to see. And it turns out to be those 10 seconds is a 4-point swing in the battle between Alpine. If he doesn't clear Ocon, they tie and say he finishes in P8. They tie for today, and they're still 11 points down. Those 12 seconds mean he outscores them. He gets the 6 points for P7, and McLaren outscore Alpine by 4. So it goes from 11 back down to 7. So now we're back in the fight here, where at a track that I figured if McLaren got a point out of this, I was going to be happy because they didn't look all that great going into this day.
Yeah, and it was just kind of probably painful for Alpine to watch because as Alonso's pulling off north, passing Bottas in the background.
Yeah.
It ended up working out the day for McLaren. Great job, Danny. It's good to see him like this, kind of, especially right towards the end of the season here. We're not sure if we're going to see him back again in F1. So that was just a nice moment to come from the day.
A result for a guy who needed one very, very badly. So let's talk about George Russell starting P2, ending up P4. I think he figured out what the tire strategy should have been. I think he was telling his team that on the radio, and they were either caught between a rock and a hard place. And I kept saying, if I'm the Mercedes engineer, yeah, Red Bull are going to get DEG about 10 laps after this race ends.
Yep.
like, have you not seen this movie before? But, the tires turned out to be, I think, the definitive thing for George Russell. He only makes it up to P4, but he did manage to get the point for fastest lap. So thoughts on Russell's day?
Yeah, so this was a day they really should have listened to their driver. That was tough. But what my first issue with Mercedes was that they put both cars on the mediums. I think they should have thrown the softs at least on Russell and let him really have a go at Max because of how important track position is here. So that was a little disappointing to go the same direction with both cars throughout the entire race. I think when they put the hards on Hamilton, I was like, fine. It did just lure them into, they pulled the trigger way too early on Russell though, because the first 2 laps on those hards looked good. And that's why so many people switched, because I don't know why they warmed up so quickly, because the first 2 laps he was going, at least when Hamilton was coming out, faster than Verstappen, on the hards. Things were looking good. So okay, let's put Russell on them. And then 3 laps into the stint, it just hit the wall. We're done. It just didn't work. But I think they should have, even seeing the pace on those hards for a minute, should have done something different with Russell. Should have left him out there at least to pull Perez Abu Dhabi and to hold up Max. I think they just kind of succeeded any minuscule chance they had at victory when they brought Russell in. So,
yeah, a weekend that looked so promising, and even after qualifying, it looked really promising because their long run pace looked really good on Friday. Of what we got on Friday, but yeah, it just looked like once you see the hard tire, and the consensus that I had read from all of the smart people was that this was one tire compound too hard for this track. We really should have had C5, C4, C3 instead of C2, C3, C4, which is what we ended up with. And when the consensus is like that, I'm like, and why the hell is the hard tire making an appearance? Are we that spooked by a second pit stop? I mean, that's gotta be the answer.
And we watched Ferrari just do this earlier in the year and absolutely destroy their race when everybody was on the consensus the hard is not the move. So maybe hopefully we've learned some lessons today.
Yeah. Number one, Pirelli, if you're listening, please bring us a C5 tire. It might help. I don't know what else we can do to give CPR to this circuit, but that might be one thing you can do. Is at least let's have the right tires for the conditions. But yeah, I mean, George, the radio message that I thought was so telling when he's like, guys, the tires are dead. Why are you not pulling me in? And they're like, well, we think their tires are going to be more dead than yours. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not going to fucking matter, dude. No. Why don't you bring him in and let's see what he can do? Let him run. Let him run.
But I mean, Russell was complaining, Hamilton was complaining. So at this point, you have nothing to lose. Just pull him in, try something different. I hated seeing them just kind of sit there like that. We know how well Verstappen can manage on tires in these cars. So that was painful. And the only reason they were able to secure second, I think, was because Perez had a 5-second pit stop. I think had he not had that, he might have jumped Hamilton too. So, yeah. So
let's get into the podium. The P3, very popular to be on the podium, obviously. Sergio Checo Perez. P2, 2 consecutive P2s back to back. Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. But P1 didn't look like he was challenged hardly at all today. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. Max and Red Bull going aggressive on tires, and that looked like to be the winning move prior to the race.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Red Bull, once again, it's the best car out there, and Max is the best driver at the moment on the grid, so it's just the combo it's fully unbeatable. And, yeah, disappointing because we got really excited during the practice sessions this weekend. And then we're back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, we're back to the point where it's almost the Friday running. You can't read hardly anything into it because I think so many teams are running the engine so far down on power in order to preserve them. And this goes back to the rule we've complained about many times. 3 engines is not enough for this amount of races. It's nowhere near enough. We're going to have teams go through 6 and 7 power units before the season is done. I think 5 is the minimum number that you have to consider in order to really, truly try to get through a season. Otherwise, I just don't think it's going to work. And you're going to end up with these myriads, these races at the end of the year where nobody's really doing things in the practices. We had a Pirelli tire test again, which made the second FP2 session completely irrelevant. So you could have taken a nice siesta on a Friday afternoon and listened to the sound of F1 cars go around, but that was about it. And then, we saw a little bit of pure pace on Saturday, obviously in the qualifying, but come race day, everybody was it looked like everybody was waiting for somebody to try to do something, and nobody did anything. And oh, by the way, we ran out of time and the race ended. And there you go. So by the time anybody gave anybody the hurry up, it was far too late. The only one, like I said, that we saw do things for most of this race was Daniel Ricardo, who I think took the home run strategy try and made it work. So at least kudos for that. But I mean, this circuit's got some problems. For a circuit that gives really good races for Formula E or for some other categories, F1 just doesn't seem to want to work here. And that's sad.
Agreed.
All right. Well, we will leave this race here. We will take a quick break. We will come back. We'll pay a bill or two. We'll come back. We'll recap where the standings are. We'll recap where the tight battles are as we go into the last couple races. And then we'll open it up to our favorite segment, the fan email segment. We'll have your takes on today's race and this weekend. We'll give some awards. We'll look at the predictions. Yikes. I don't know that I want to. Let's just put it this way. I don't really want to look at them, but we'll look at them. So come on back and watch me squirm. All right, welcome back. This is season 4, episode number 43 of the Outlap F1 podcast. And this is our 2022 Mexico Grand Prix race review. You've got Andy and I'm along with Deanna tonight. And we just wrapped up kind of a not super exciting Mexican Grand Prix. But it does mean we do have updated standings to talk about. So Dee, take us through the top 10 in the drivers.
Yep. So Verstappen, once again, is our champion and has once again extended his lead to 416 points. Behind him, now in second, is Perez, overtaking Leclerc in third, and they are on 280 and 275, respectively. In fourth is George Russell on 231. In fifth, Hamilton has overtaken Sainz, and he's on 216, with Sainz on 212. Norris, again, comfortably best of the rest, on 111. Ocon in 8th on 82, Alonso in 9th on 71, and Valtteri Bottas rounds out the top 10 with 47.
All right, as far as the team goes, Red Bull Racing Powertrains has wrapped up the constructors. They are on 696 points. Second place is Ferrari on 487. Third is now a hard-charging Mercedes on 447. Fourth is Alpine on 153. Just 7 points ahead of McLaren. Thank you, Daniel Ricciardo, today on 146. Sixth place is Alfa Romeo on 53. Seventh, Aston Martin, right on their heels at 49. Eighth place, not too far back, is Haas Ferrari on 36, but they are defending more than attacking. Ninth place, AlphaTauri with 35 points. And 10th place, a bit adrift from the rest, but still scoring good points for them this year, is Williams on 8 points. All right. So we will now turn it over to you, the listener, and you, the tweeter. And thank you so much for all of the good interaction over the course of the weekend. Dee, as James would say, it's your time to shine. Let's get into it.
Yes. So starting with Rachel Fleming, she says 2 things from the race. Where has that Danny Rick been since Italy 2021? It's like the Yuki shunt finally triggered something and he was a man possessed. Also, why didn't the Mercs split the strategies and do what McLaren did with Danny Rick? They had nothing to lose if they did, and it covered them just in case the mediums didn't fail on the Red Bulls, which turned out to be the case. Instead, they put both drivers on the hards and promised them that they would come good and Red Bull would fail. And neither happened. kudos to George for even trying. I have a puncture line to try to get the team to box him to change the tires. So his first thoughts on... go ahead, sorry.
Oh, thoughts on Danny Rick. I love to see it. All of a sudden, I'm like watching and I'm like, oh, he's passing left and right. And I saw the collision and I went, uh-oh. I'm like, I knew he was going to get a penalty. I was surprised, like I said, that it was 10 seconds versus 5 seconds, because whenever you have that inside-outside type move and, somebody gets punted, it's 5 seconds. It's been 5 seconds all year long. Why this incident is worse than half the other ones that we've seen, I don't understand. So, but as I'm watching Ricardo's timing on the timing board, I'm going, he's going to net points. And then it goes from, he's going to net 8th. Well, maybe he'll just hang this out in 7th, and damn if he didn't do it. So it's good to know that that's still in there somewhere. More of that, please, at least to finish up the rest of this year. And hopefully then he gets a good drive in a reserve role somewhere where he can continue to contribute, because that's what he wants to do. I've seen several interviews, people have put it to him, hey, wouldn't you love America? Wouldn't you want to do things like, i.e. NASCAR, maybe IndyCar? His life right now wants to be F1. I don't know that that's necessarily going to work, but I respect the decision, and I hope he's able to pull this off, because if he can, it'd be one hell of a career rescue job for a guy that a lot of people thought was over it. As to the tire strategy with Mercedes, this is probably the other big storyline from the race. Don't understand it. Why you think the car that has been the nicest on its tires the entire year is suddenly going to now get this weird tire deg that it hasn't shown you all year, and you're banking on that to make your race? Yeah, that's one thing. One leap too far. I can't make that. So they should have tried something with George. They had a big enough gap to the back. Even if you lose the 20 seconds, he might make up the 20 seconds. You saw Danny Rick do that. Did not understand that strategy at all.
Maybe it makes sense if you're battling Ferrari, but definitely not Red Bull.
Very true. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, the formula says, hey guys, my thoughts on the race. Why did AlphaTauri not immediately tell Gasly to give the place back to Stroll? What am I missing from a strategy standpoint here? I guess we'll start here and we'll go into the other points.
Sure. Go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, all right. The only thing that I saw was that obviously Gasly was able to then open up a bigger gap. There was Albon behind. If he immediately gives it back, there's nothing to say that Alex Albon doesn't try one of his patented zip moves and tries to go in and overtake there. And now you've lost 2 positions. And as we've seen many times, sometimes you get stuck behind a Williams with a track with a long straight. That's a tough thing to do. And maybe Gasly didn't think it was a penalty, or didn't think he was going to get a penalty. So, he was just, I think, trying to gun it in order to get up as much of a gap as he could. The problem that he's going to have now, he is now on 10 penalty points. He actually had one expire this weekend, and that's what saves him from the race ban. The next penalty point for him does not expire until May of next year. So, yes, it probably worked out well for the immediate, but in the long run, if he's found guilty of anything, it is an automatic race ban. Even if he gets anything that accrues a penalty point. So a reprimand that accrues a penalty point or something like that could potentially cause him to have a race ban. In which case, I think we would either see Nick DeVries in another car, or I think Liam Lawson is the other backup. So we may have some more Gasly drama before this season ends on the unfortunate side.
Well, then maybe next year, if it happens next year, maybe we can see, I don't know, Jack Doohan in the car. It's getting dangerously close on that one. I don't like it. So awesome. So the second point is Pirelli's current lineup of tires needs some work. I don't know the answer, but all too often the hard compound is unusable or not competitive.
Yeah, I think the call has been made to be way too conservative. That is almost, unfortunately, I think that's to be expected in a year one of regulations, because if we have tires that start to delaminate or pop, or we end up with like a British Grand Prix scenario from, say, 2020, where we've got guys running on the hardest compound that they brought and the tires were still failing, Pirelli can't have that be the answer. So as painful as this is, it's a better answer for Pirelli than the alternative. And that's why I think they went to go a little more conservative here. I think if you talk to Mario Isola after the end of this race, now that they have data here, I think he would say, hey, next year we'll probably bring C3, C4, C5. I'm hopeful they'll at least look at that data and come to that same conclusion because this, like I said, this race needs some help.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a direct result of Silverstone 2020. I mean, obviously it wasn't fun to watch today, but I'd rather them go too far and we can kind of pare it back as we go along. And hopefully these boring 90-hour practice sessions will benefit us in the future.
Yeah, let's hope they learned something. I think they learned something at COTA. I don't know what they learned here other than, yeah, so I don't know.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, other than these compounds don't work.
Yeah. Okay, so the final point here, George didn't exactly drop the ball on the race start, but he sure didn't maximize his opportunity. He's developing a bit of a reputation for sketchy starts. Hopefully he gets past that soon.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a replay of his start. He gets forced to the outside, which is better than probably being where he was, which was relegated to the inside. Why, you know, I guess he was just kind of ended up kind of in a bit of a no man's land. He ended up on the outside, I think, going into coming out of turn 3, and that pretty much relegated him back behind Perez. He has had some dodgy starts this season. I think that's true. And that's something he can work on. You know, I mean, it's Mercedes as a whole is getting better. I think his starts have gotten better. But it is definitely something that he can add to his game and probably will work on a lot this offseason.
And I think it's a very different ball game starting at the front versus starting at the very back, which is what he did for many years. So hopefully that gets better over the next couple seasons. Okay, so next up, I'm going to mess this up again.
George Stopoulos Mike.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really want your opinion on Ricardo crushing penalty. I think we've talked about this. Thought the penalty was warranted. 10 seconds seems a little harsh.
Yeah, it's a penalty, but it's not 10 seconds. I don't know why you're throwing the book at him here versus something else.
Yep. Next up, East Coast Sharks fan says, is it rude to say this race was on par with what Monaco is normally? Not this year because of the weather, but normally an equally bad snooze fest.
Yeah, I will admit, right around the first pit stops, my eyes were I was waffling going up and down. I'd been doing things early in my part of the day, which I normally reserve for my F1 time. So my brain power was a little distracted. It was a tough race to follow until the very, very end when it got fun there. But you're fair to say that, Sharks fan.
And I would say even like Monaco 21, there was like 3 overtakes at that. At least there, the gaps are close, so you can kind of talk yourself into like, this is exciting. People are close and all of this stuff. But here,
all it takes is one wall.
Yes, like there's some excitement there, but here it was just wide gaps and nobody was really going much anywhere. So fair. Next up, We Are Checking says, race was just boring. Mercedes have done a great job making improvements while Ferrari seemed to have mailed the season in. Thank goodness for Danny Rick giving us something interesting to watch. Congrats, Max. 14 wins and counting will stand for a long time. I sure hope so.
Yeah, it's gonna take some mega efforts. I think, especially with the area, now we're in an era of a cost cap. I don't think you're gonna see. Unless you get another driver with a seminal talent like Max who can become one with the car like he has, be able to do this. Now, the next opportunity may be like 24, or not 24, but 26 when we have the new engine regs, and maybe somebody gets it 10 times better than, a manufacturer gets it better than somebody else does. That may be the only other real opportunity, I think, for the dominance, because they don't want it to be like this. They want it to be a lot closer. That's what we're all trying to go for. I mean, in terms of Mercedes, they have been making incremental progress. I think that they are probably in the best position to be P2 coming out of the gate next year, going into it. In terms of Ferrari, what I think killed them, I think that technical directive that happened in the middle of the year really, really hurt them. I've heard that they had some sort of a trick to their floor that was really helping with the tire deg, and that's what they're suffering from so badly now because they can't use that trick anymore. So where we thought when that directive came out that it was going to hit Red Bull, who it hit really worse was Ferrari, and they're the ones that suffered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is kind of where you see why Mercedes has been such a dominant organization for the past few years, lots of years. And they definitely came out very clear third, but they have been able to develop that car, and you can see clear progress in that car, whereas Ferrari, like you said, I mean, they got hampered by that directive, but it just seems kind of classic Ferrari. They don't seem to be making a whole lot of huge leaps elsewhere. Hopefully that's wrong, but they just happened to nail it out of the gate, but just couldn't keep up with everybody else. So, I mean, the car still looks good. Hopefully with Red Bull's development time wind tunnel time getting broken down, hopefully we can enter the next season kind of all on a level playing field between the three. I think that would be the dream, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is that Mercedes have learned their lesson of what they tried to do and then what obviously didn't work, and have come up either with ways to make it work or a concept that will work better. I'm hoping that that's the same for a lot of teams. That you realize that you went down a path and you had to turn around. We saw Aston Martin. I still think Aston Martin is going to eventually at some point come good and work themselves into this conversation somehow, just because they put so much money into it and they've got all this talent. It's just so amazing to me that it hasn't cooked. But yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to see. I think this record's going to stand for a very, very long time. It's going to have to be a seminal talent, the wonderkin that just becomes one with the car and just takes it to a height never seen before. Because this is not easy to do, especially with the variety of tracks and the locations all over the place.
Right. All right. Next up, Dave Doherty asks, thoughts on Alfa Romeo's race?
We kind of alluded to it earlier. I thought Bottas was strong. The qualifying effort was very, if not surprising, but I think we have seen since that upgrade package has come in, it's obviously working for them. It's definitely worked for them at COTA. It definitely worked for them here. They now just have to work on getting the whole package together. I think the qualifying was probably a little flattering to them this weekend. The race pace was probably around here, but that isn't up from where they have been. They have been outside of the points consistently, and they're not breaking down anymore. So if they can keep the car on the track and get it to the finish line, hey, they might score a few more points before the season's out, and they need it because they're locked in a battle too.
Yeah, and I think maybe Zhou towards the end might have started to come back. There, he was on that, again, ideal strategy, but he did switch over way later than everybody else. I think he was the last person to come off those mediums. But yeah, I don't know. Bottas, again, that qualifying was strong. They started off the year super strong. I think they went in the wrong direction and then have kind of righted the ship towards the end of the season. So hopefully next year they can really kind of come out the gate swinging. And I'm sure now that is what Audi would like to see. And hopefully they'll start getting some money from them and we'll really start seeing some improvements.
Yeah, and I love seeing those wheel rims just do well because they are I think the best one of the grid by far.
And finally, Michelle says, Z.
Yeah,
it was a snooze fest.
Yes.
Yep.
You're not alone in that. I wish I could try to shine, polish the pig a little bit. Sometimes races are like this. This is sometimes what we get. We've tried to kind of dissect as to why if you make the tires a little softer, maybe that helps. I do think there are a couple of corners that could use some reprofiling to make them a little more ideal for overtaking. They've tried to add DRS zones. The DRS is just not powerful enough here with what we have package wise. And the thing that nobody's ever going to go after is I think you got to increase the pit speed limit a little bit. I think we went way too conservative on that because we had people getting hit and there were people that were in that area that frankly shouldn't have been there. Well, now we've gotten the people out of there. And I think if we actually let the cars be race cars again through the pit stops, you'd see multiple strategies, multiple pit stops, where everybody here was so afraid of that second stop, even though they were screaming of it before the race. Hey, we think the right answer here is a two-stopper.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. Thank you so much for everybody for contributing. This is always super fun to get into your thoughts on today's race. All right. So we will now get into awards, and we will start off with the rubbish. I'm sure there's plenty of good candidates here. Dee, what's your thought?
Staying on theme for today, it's the track layout. It just doesn't work. Even with a whole new set of regs that we've seen work on some other tracks this year, it wasn't great. Hopefully they can do some kind of reprofiling or something, again, because those fans there deserve it. And also, congrats to the FIA and Ferrari. I didn't give it to you for the first time probably this entire season.
That takes some doing to get off of Deanna's list. And the FIA's gave you lots of stuff to go after, too.
Yes. The FIA, not great. But, I mean, granted, it was a stupid reason that Alonso got his place back, but he got his place back. They did give Red Bull a penalty other than the financial penalty that I think was the right choice. So, okay, you took a very long time and did it in a very stupid way, but whatever. The Daniel Ricciardo penalty was 10 seconds way too aggressive, but at least we did that in a reasonable amount of time. And we gave the Gasly penalty in a reasonable amount of time. So overall, with all the egregious incidents we've seen recently, this was like gold star weekend for the FIA, which the bar is low.
They skirt by with like a D plus. Like it's like they didn't fail. You technically passed the course. You got your D plus, so be happy.
Yeah. And Ferrari, Ferrari could be a good candidate here too, but I'll let them slide as well.
So
they got points, both cars across the finish line.
Give that turbocharger some air. I feel like you need to have Schwarzenegger going. Give them some air. Give them some air. But anyway, my rubbish award goes out to just some absolutely egregious fan behavior this week. From one side, not apparently understanding how a plea bargain works. We still don't know what that is. To a frankly really dumb debate this morning about what a presenter said what about to whom in some sort of, and this is the Ted Kravitz thing, I'll just come out and say it, in a hypothetical situation. To Red Bull having the skin of and the makeup apparently of Eric Cartman this weekend, that the second you tap them, they start screaming that they've been mortally wounded. But that's not even the worst of it. To me, the worst part of it was there were fans that frankly crossed the line and went after, I think it was a woman FIA steward, so much to the point that the Alpine and Alonso had to say, enough is enough, people. And there were some not nice things said directed at Lewis's way after the race. Thank you very much, Sergio Perez, for basically waving his finger and knocking that out before it got any worse. It just makes it hard to want to be a fan. And all I want to do is be a fan. All I want to do is show up and talk about, like, you hear it when we talk about stuff that we love, when we talk about great moves and sector times and the great parts of this sport. This other stuff, it just makes it hard. It's very heavy. We gotta do something. I don't know what or how we fix it, but damn, let's just be nicer to each other. God damn.
Agreed.
All right, I will move on. We will now get into the analysis paralysis. I bet this one is probably going to be a slam dunk, but Dee, I'll let you go first.
Yep. So it goes to Mercedes for not only putting one car on hards, but then putting the second car on hards and not splitting the strategy, and to start both cars on mediums and not splitting the strategy there, and giving Russell an opportunity or Hamilton an opportunity to see what they could do in that situation. I think it was just a mess all around. Not letting the drivers come back in when they were miserable in their tires. Not good. And for thinking that Red Bull's tires would fall off.
When have we seen that happen at all? I really can't think of a race. Like the races where they haven't won, it's been because he's like DNF'd or crashed or something. It hasn't been because of tire drag. But anyway, I'm also going to give this to Mercedes. And anybody who thought, I know we had limited running after Friday, but somebody needs to read the release that says the hard tire is not a good idea. And sometimes too often, I think, the emailer nailed it. We fall in love with that tire because we're so afraid of a second pit stop. I didn't think that was the right way to go. It obviously was proven right by what Max and Red Bull were able to do. All right, so we will move forward. We will go into our dark horse. D, what's your thought?
It has to be Danny Rick, and he would have been my driver of the day had it not been for taking Sonoda out. But yeah, great recovery drive and overcoming that 10-second penalty. It was awesome. Only really good bit of excitement we got today.
Probably the last time I'm going to get a chance to do this, so I'm going to just take the advantage here and go, Daniel Ricardo, Daniel Ricardo. Hell of a drive, mega drive, right when he needed it. It was fun to watch the overtakes. That's the guy I thought we had. Great race for him today. And hopefully it spurns him on. I hope he has a good result in Brazil. I hope he has a good result in Abu Dhabi, and he can get the best job that he can. In all honesty there. All right, so we will now move into the driver of the day. I'm going to go first on this one. I will just hand it to Max Verstappen. He was in another league, untouchable all day long. Is it anybody else? D, what's your thought?
It has to be Max Verstappen winning for Mexico on pole, which they said over and over and over again was not likely to happen, which obviously he had to go and prove absolutely everything wrong.
They were trying to build the drama. You could tell that they were trying to build the drama. And the other thing that happened is we had no wreck on lap one. Like, I was fully expecting somebody. Like, all of a sudden I went, well, the two assumptions that I had, one, the pole sitter was going to get mugged, and two, we're not going to make it through lap one. Those didn't happen. And I went, oh, this could be long.
Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that leaves us down to the thing that I don't really want to talk about. This would be our predictions. I'll just, do the Band-Aid and come right off and say, yep, I scored no points. So I was the dead last in the basement loser for the week. James was 3 points better than I was. He had the fastest lap time, the P1 podium, and the P3 podium. D, you finished second this week. You have 4 points. You got the pole sitter, the fastest quali time, the P1 podium, and the P2 podium. But that doesn't – John is pulling a Max Verstappen this year. It doesn't seem like whatever we throw at him, he keeps coming good. He got the pole sitter, and he swept today's podium. P1, P2, P3, had the fastest driver in George Russell, so kudos on that call. And the P9 bonus pick, he had Lando Norris in P9 as it turned out. So that brings our season standings. John obviously is scared to death to ship that trophy, but D, I have faith. We've got 2 races to go. You can track him down. 58 points. D, you have 52. James on 47, and I'm still stuck on 44.
Yeah, maybe we need to get to James. I don't know if it's another double points situation. Maybe it's we pick all the way 1 to 20 at Abu Dhabi.
P19,
we're
P18,
going to find a way.
Yes.
We're going to find a way.
Just keep expanding the competition.
Yeah.
Until we find there. Something that works. But anyway, keep tuned to that. It's closer than the championship races are this season. All right. I guess that wraps up the Mexican round of the championship. We take a week off, and then we have my birthday weekend, and I have a race on my birthday in Brazil. It's a sprint weekend, so that'll be an interesting thing to see. We saw how much interesting the sprint was last weekend. I love Interlagos. I think it's a track that can throw up some really fun results. It can there's a chance for racing, much better racing than I think what we saw here. So that I am looking very much forward to. D, any thoughts on Brazil?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is way up there with one of the tracks I'm most excited to see the new regs at. So I love it. Hopefully we get a good sprint and a good race, and it should just be fun being back in August. It's I think my favorite track. So happy to be back.
And it will be a passionate crowd and a Lewis favoring crowd is my guess, if last year was any indication. So we will see all the passion and pageantry of Brazil in a couple weeks' time. We'll be back. James and I will be back and do our preview the Wednesday before the race, and then we will hopefully, I don't know if we'll all be back for the review. I don't know. My life seems to go in 1 week increments right now, so I don't want to say anything beyond the immediate. But if we can, we will all be on to do a review and set us up for our last 2 rounds of the year. So for Dee, thanks very much for hopping on. You had a bit of the food poisoning thing going on, so we appreciate you powering through there. But we'll be back in a couple weeks' time. And as always, may all your laps be fast.